So, how about I just start with doing a little introduction, a little housekeeping, um, and I'll let, well, first, my name is Jaime. I'm one of the counselors at Dallas College. Specifically, I'm at the Eastfield campus, and with me today is Miss Francine. Miss Francine, you want to tell our students, our guests, a little bit about yourself?
Yes, my name is Francine Maynard, and I'm a Title IX coordinator at the North Lake campus, and glad that you are here with us today.
Thank you. And again, just a few things. One, we have a wonderful presenter. His name is Sean Woods. He is from Darcy, that's DARCC, the Dallas Area Rape Crisis Center. And before we turn it over to him, I wanted to first thank everyone for being here and also let you know that of course, the topic we're discussing, sexual violence, is a sensitive topic. And so if at any time you feel like it's a little too much, you're more than welcome. You're not required to stay. And you can also, if ever you would like to meet with a counselor, I'm putting in the chat box the email. You can just email counseling at dcccd.edu, and we'd be happy to schedule an appointment. And we also have another counselor today, Ms. Dahlia, and she is available in case anyone would like to chat with her if this becomes a little too much. Oh, there she is. Hi, Dahlia.
Hi, I'm Dahlia Blell. I'm the Assistant Director of Counseling Services for Dallas College, and thank you for attending this workshop. We have another intern on here, a counseling intern. Her name's Brittany Seimer, and we are available if students want to talk to us away from the workshop. So just put it in the chat, Dahlia, I want to talk to you, or Brittany, and we will help get you to a breakout session.
Thank you, Dahlia. And so, again, also, if you have any questions, I'm sure Sean would be happy to answer them. You can also, if you're a little shy, don't worry. You can put your questions in the chat box as well, and I'll be monitoring the chat box. If you have questions, I can speak up on your behalf. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to our awesome guest speaker, Sean Woods, and take it away, Sean.
All right, everybody, thank you so much for having me. Again, today's topic, Sexual Violence 101. We're going to be delving into what that term means, what are all the behaviors, attitudes, and beliefs that fuel and go into the word sexual violence. We're going to look a little bit as well at preventing it, because my job title is Primary Prevention Coordinator. I wouldn't be a preventioneer if I wasn't talking about how to stop sexual violence from happening in the first place. But I have to talk about Darcy just a little bit. Darcy is committed to ending sexual violence in North Texas while serving those impacted by it. And we want to see the elimination of sexual violence in North Texas communities. And we do it through a lot of different ways, but folks, the best way to get our information, to learn more about our services, and to access them is to use that hotline number, 972-641-7273. From there you can access all our amazing services, and be sure to follow us on all the social media that I know we're always on way too much of the time, and give us a shout on there, give us a like, give us a follow. So in your own words, in the chat, unmute yourselves, whatever works best. How do you describe sexual violence? When you hear the term, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? Is it a behavior? Is it a definition? Let me know. What are your thoughts? In the chat, unmute yourselves, whatever's best. What do we think? What is sexual violence? Whenever you think of that term, what pops in your mind first and foremost? Does anything pop into your mind? Abuse. Yes, very much so. Definitely. I would definitely put abuse on there. Yeah. Aggression. Yeah. Yeah. Usually the cornerstone of any violent act is going to have that aggression. I totally agree with you on that. So, again, personal relationships. Ooh, yeah. And we can definitely get into some statistics about just sexual violence in general, how 4 out of 5 times the victim of sexual violence knows their perpetrator, meaning there's usually some type of personal relationship going on there. Forcefulness. Yep. Yeah. And see, everything that everyone has said in the chat so far is completely correct. And the reason why that is because sexual violence is an umbrella term. It's a very broad term used to define several different acts and behaviors and attitudes. Sexual violence refers to any activity where consent is not obtained or given freely. Any sexual context. So that is going to include our verbal sexual harassment all the way to our definition of rape down there. The penetration, no matter how slight, of the vagina or anus with any body part or object, or oral penetration by a sex organ by another person without the consent of the victim. It includes all these types of behaviors from the top sexual harassment down. So when I am referring to sexual violence, just know I'm referring to this entire range of behavior. So to define sexual violence, however, we have to define consent. So whenever you hear the word consent, what do you think of? What does consent mean to you? What is the definition? You can feel free to bust out the dictionary on me. What do we think? Consent. Giving permission, agreement. Perfect, beautiful. It's exactly what it is. However, we're going to go a little bit more in depth about what that permission looks like and what that agreement looks like. First of all, we want our consent to be freely given. We want it to be affirmative and enthusiastic, and we have to have the capacity to consent. Freely given means that I am able to give my consent of my own free will. I'm not being blackmailed into it. No one is begging me or forcing me into a situation, and I can always take back my consent no matter the time, no matter the act, no matter if we're just about to do something or just about to finish something, it doesn't matter. I can always take it back. And being informed means that I know what I'm getting into. I know my person's boundaries, my own boundaries before we even begin, and I know where to stop and what to do. If I all of a sudden we say, okay, maybe we're going to do oral, and somebody starts bringing out a condom, like, hey, no, we already said, like, this is where I want to stop. Why are you progressing with this? That's what it means to be informed. Affirmative enthusiastic, of course, means that did we express those specific overt actions, and do you want to be there? Do you want to participate? If somebody is begging me, coercing me, inducing me by fraud, anything like that, that's not going to produce enthusiasm. I can't consent to that in the first place. Consent is always ongoing as well. We are checking in for each different touch, each different act. We are checking in every day, every hour that we do this, because we are not going to assume that we have consent just because we've hooked up with that person before, or, oh, I'm married to them, or, oh, they're my girlfriend or boyfriend or person of so many years and so much time. I don't have to ask for consent anymore. No, you do. Maybe we've gotten really good about checking in with consent at that stage, but we can't just say like, well, it's fine, they'll let me know. No, we're going to check in all the time. That consent should always be an ongoing process. And then lastly, we have to have the capacity to consent. What is the age of consent in the state of Texas? Pop quiz. This will not affect your education or anything. 18, okay. What do we think? 18? Sound like a good number? In the state of Texas. Susan, 17, correct. It is age 17 in the state of Texas. But, of course, my warning is that does not mean that we can solicit nudes online at the age of 17. If we do that, that is the distribution and creation of child pornography, which is a felony. So let's make sure we are all abundantly clear on that. Do not want to be encouraging anybody getting a felony here. So yes, age of consent in Texas is 17. So alongside the age of consent, we also want to take into consideration a few other things. Does everyone understand the situation they're in? Does everyone understand what consent is and what a sexual act is? If not, we could be taking advantage of somebody, perhaps somebody with maybe an intellectual disability, or is somebody not consenting, but they can't leave the room, or are we taking advantage of a differently abled person? Let's always keep that in mind. Intoxication, we do not want to be drunk, we do not want to be high, we don't want to be unconscious or asleep, we want to be awake, we want to be lucid. And of course, we also have to watch out for our vulnerable populations as well. There's quite a few of them. The ones that I always mention would be the elderly, maybe those of us going through dementia, or our children, who of course cannot consent whatsoever. Other vulnerable populations would be the military, prison inmates, the LGBTQ community, our differently abled friends, people of color, the Black community. Those are just a few of our populations that experience more sexual violence because they lack the ability sometimes to be able to speak out. There's less resources for those communities. So we always want to keep that in mind when we're talking about sexual violence in general. But again, we can always sum up consent in what there are so many words into that consent should be freely given, reversible, informed, enthusiastic, and specific, also known as fries. Everybody loves fries, so hopefully that's a great, quick way for you to remember our conversation around consent. So you now understand that sexual violence is any sexual contact without consent. Consent being freely given, enthusiastic, affirmative, and we have to have the capacity to consent. So now we understand our baseline for sexual violence. Now we can look at the continuum of sexual violence. We can look at all the different types of behaviors that could possibly be on here. And there are a few other spectrums that I think I have in here, and they're going to list some things differently. Maybe they're going to look more at attitudes and beliefs. Fine. We're going to look more at the actual behaviors around sexual violence. So first and foremost, we have our recognition of behaviors. We have down here on the left side, what I always like to say for this spectrum is how illicit is the act. Maybe on the left side, a sexist joke. That's definitely not illegal. Maybe it's distasteful, maybe it's off color, but I'm not going to go to jail for saying a sexist joke. Whereas on the right side of the spectrum, we are going to have sexual assault and rape. We're going to have those outright, very recognizable behaviors. However, when we look at the spectrum of recognition, we have to recognize that the frequency at which these behaviors happen is inverse, meaning that the behaviors on the left side here are less illicit, less illegal behaviors. We're going to see that more daily. We're going to see that more on social media versus sexual assault and rape. That's just how it works. However, if we are not challenging the behaviors down here towards the left, how are we ever supposed to prevent what's going on the right-hand side? So with that kind of said, let me, oh no, not the chat. Don't go away. Let me annotate here. If my computer will allow me to annotate, please. I would love that. Can we do that? Can we do that? Okay. So like I said, maybe sex, oh, that's a very interesting color. Okay, we got sexist joke over here. Maybe we have sexual harassment, however you want to pronounce it for our British friends. And then we have sexual assault, rape. Is that going to go off the screen? That's not very helpful. Let me do this up here. So with that said, where would something like, oh, I don't know, victim blaming? Something like, oh, well, they had it coming. I mean, that's what you get for hanging out with that person. We all knew they were like this. Well, you had too much to drink. You should have watched what you were wearing. That's what you get for going out late at night. Those statements where you're putting the majority of the blame for this crime happening on the victim rather than saying like, oh, well, this was a crime perpetrated by somebody that took advantage of you. So we're going to put the weight of that on them because nobody wants to be assaulted. Where would you put victim blaming on the spectrum? What do we think? From low, middle, high, in between, what do we think? Where would you place this as far as the spectrum here? In between, high, and in between. Okay, so I think that's going to be kind of the middle here. Okay. So maybe, are we thinking maybe this is right? Oh, well. What do we think? Oh, we're saying in between high and the middle. Okay, yeah. Okay. What does anybody else think? Do we think that's kind of a medium to high behavior? Why is it a medium to high behavior? Because it's not illegal. It's not, I can say that all I want, especially when I go on Facebook, if I go on TikTok, I'm going to see a lot of victim blaming. That's not necessarily illegal. Why would we put that up here towards the higher end? Happens more than people think. Oh yeah. And it's very subtle too. We victim blame for a lot of things, not just sexual violence in general, but I see this the most with sexual violence. We have a very risk reduction mentality when we live in this world, where we're trying to reduce our risk of violence occurring to us. So when violence does occur to us, it must be our fault. No, that's not how it works. People are taking advantage of us in some way. People are committing a crime to us. What I always say for victim blaming is, if we have somebody that's being victim blamed for going out, for doing this, for going that, let's replace the crime, sexual violence, with theft, or let's replace it with murder. Are you going to victim blame somebody for getting murdered? Like, that's what you get for going to that party. You were just asking to get murdered. I mean, look at what you were wearing. No, that doesn't really make sense. So why are we victim blaming in the first place? Oh yeah, so for victim blaming, it stops people from speaking out. It minimizes what happens. Yeah, okay. I definitely agree with everybody on that. What about something like, no, I'm sorry for any English majors here. I'm not going to be very grammatically correct with these. I don't want you wearing that. I don't want you wearing that. What do we think about this? Where would you put this on the spectrum? Kind of different than the other behaviors we've probably talked about so far. Doesn't seem very explicit about what it means. But what do we think? I don't want you wearing that. Maybe I'm saying that to my partner. I look at their outfit. I don't want you wearing that. What do we think here, y'all? In the middle. Okay, interesting. Oh, no. Why are we putting that in the middle? What do we think? See, Brittany's saying maybe higher frequency, like maybe a little bit towards the left-hand side here. Why are we thinking middle? Why are we thinking towards the left? And what's the thought process behind that, folks? Any particular reasons why? I'm just always curious why people put things where. Depends on age, maybe. Okay. It's something that people hear every day to a certain degree. Yeah. Maturity. Yeah. Ooh, controlling behavior. Or it indicates that what you wear results in sexual assault. Yeah. Okay. So we're kind of preemptively victim blaming in the first place. And yeah, I totally agree. It's very controlling to say that in some ways. There's context, of course, to everything. I've had partners before where they would want me to critique their outfit in some way. Completely fine. They consent with that in the first place. But I've never outright been like, oh yeah, don't wear that. Oh, you're not getting out of the house with that. But it's very normalized, especially again, I'm on TikTok all the time. I see that a lot. I see that kind of the controlling behavior. I've seen this trend going on where like I bought my girlfriend a new swimsuit, and instead of a swimsuit, it's like a submarine outfit, like where you like deep dive into the ocean. It's like completely covered up. There's the joke. That's the joke. But a lot of them seem to be really taking that seriously. So okay, I'm glad that was just a quick little exercise that I wanted to share with you all. I wanted to get everyone thinking about this spectrum here. It doesn't always include these superly explicitly sexually violent acts. It can include a derogatory statement. It can include these mentalities like the victim blaming mentality. So I want us to all be aware about that spectrum of behavior. And I'm going to be referring to that a lot going forward. Oh, no, go away. There we go. Oh, we're just going to do it again? Okay. The problem with victim blaming here, the problem with victim blaming in general, is that because we are focused on risk reduction and we're focused on placing the blame on the victim if you're not checking off all your boxes, which, don't get me wrong, I check off a lot of boxes when I reduce my risk. I look at my car before I get in there. I, park under a well-lit area. I do all the things. But if I still get assaulted, it's still not my fault. I didn't want to be assaulted in the first place. Just because we're trying to reduce our risk to be assaulted does not mean we deserve to be assaulted if it still happens. And don't get me wrong, you can check off every box in the world. You could just never leave your home and somebody could still assault you in some way. That's just how this crime can work. So if that's what we're focusing on, we're focusing on that risk reduction, we're focusing on victim blaming, we're less likely to look at the signs that lead to people perpetrating this crime. That's how we're going to start changing the conversation and preventing it from happening in the first place. If we're so focused on the victim blaming, we're not going to see the signs. Whereas if it's the opposite, if we're looking for the signs, we understand that nobody should be assaulted. We understand that there are behaviors, attitudes, and beliefs that lead to somebody committing sexual violence. We're more likely to recognize the signs and want to actually do something about it. Victim blaming really goes hand in hand with that rape culture as well. And you may have heard this word before. Even before I got into work, I was hearing rape culture left and right quite frequently. Pretty much rape culture is where we normalize and excuse sexual violence from happening in the first place. The one that I will look at always and forever would be the case of Brock Turner, a young man who assaulted a young woman behind a dumpster. He was stopped by two great men, arrested. He was given 6 months in prison. He was out in 2 for good behavior. A perfect example of just excusing sexual violence from happening and just saying like, well, you know, he has a promising swimming career. He's a great college kid. Don't let his life be ruined by 20 minutes of fun straight from the court reading there. So we normalize it like it happens all the time, and we say like, oh, don't let it ruin their lives. Come on, it's not that big of a deal. We excuse it from happening. And of course, things like the media and popular culture reinforce this. And I see this a lot, especially with younger kids, when it comes to talking about sports, when it comes to talking about celebrities, because, oh my gosh, celebrities and sports people are always being accused of rape and sexual violence, and it's always completely false. Well, you know, about 10% of the time it's false. 9 out of 10 times it's usually true. And a lot of the people that have been accused, especially by multiple people, should be more of a red flag than, oh, just all these people want their money. So out of the 20 people, all of them are false. So we start to fuel that narrative pretty young, and media does not help that whatsoever. And victim blaming kind of stems from that as well. We're not talking about victim blaming on the hotline, though. So what are some victim blaming examples, though, that I haven't said so far? Any that we can think of? Any new ones maybe that we've heard recently? What do you think? Victim blaming examples. What are some examples of victim blaming? I got a few on here. She must have provoked him. Look at how she was dressed. Well, why were you there? You shouldn't have drank so much. You should have done this. Why did you do that? Oh, I spoiled that. Any other victim blaming examples we can think of? You know, it can look different too. It can be little classes like, well, that's what you're sending your kid to that school. I mean, what'd you expect? That's what you get for, you know, being in that area. You should have left. Oh, you should have walked away. Yeah, you should have ran away. You should have fought back. Yes. I just did a trauma presentation recently, you know, just about talking about our trauma responses, and especially in situations where we are reacting to a perceived threat, we're usually going to rely on fight or flight. We can we use tonic immobility, also known as freeze, or we can appease. And we're not in control of that. Our brains take over at that point. So again, not just another thing that we don't want to victim blame away. But of course, we know 100% of sexual violence is caused by a perpetrator. So why focus on the victim in the first place? So to look at why sexual violence even happens in the first place, we want to look at gender socialization, because this conversation really starts very young. We start to talk about relationships, gender, your expectations of who you're supposed to be, and all of that is encompassed in this word, gender socialization. It's a process by which individuals incorporate our expectations, behaviors, attitudes, and values that are assigned by our gender. And gender socialization, I think, is wonderful when talking about puberty, changing bodies, what to expect when you go from age 12 to age 18. Super great to talk about stuff like that. However, the problem with this is when we start to create these gender stereotypes and we say like, oh, well, you know, this is what you're supposed to be if you're a woman as a little girl, and this is what you're supposed to be as a man if you're a little boy. And the problem is, like, okay, well, what if I don't want to identify as either of those genders? Or what if I don't agree with what it means to be a man or to be a woman? Well, that could be a problem. So, what are some stereotypical stuff that you've heard to describe a man, for instance? What would you describe me? A typical guy? What would you use to describe a typical woman? Stereotypes that we're accustomed to hearing. Just a quick 1-2. Okay, strong. Maybe for men. Okay. Maybe for women, what's one? Emotional. Yes. Men are strong, women are fragile. Yep. We all know what these stereotypes are, and we know they're not true to a certain degree because we are all people. We're all different and individual. However, we've all been raised to a degree with some of these stereotypes. So I wanted to do a quick activity here. So you can either pull up your phone and text in some of these answers, or you can go to pollev.com/ my name, Sean Woods, 937. And what I want you to do, I want you to give one-word responses. I think you can do multiple times. Of what are some gender stereotypes for a man? What is the ideal American man, the ideal Texas man supposed to be? And again, gender stereotypes. What are the stereotypes that men are supposed to be like? I'll text them something too. So again, you can text to that number 2233 to join. Or you can text Sean Woods 937 to that number 2233 to join in. But what are some gender stereotypes for men? Can you send the link in the chat? For sure. Oh, / oh, it's backslash. So just go ahead and copy and paste that into your browser. Oh, yes. Men are supposed to be quiet. I've already failed this. I'm a blabbermouth. I've already failed this stereotype activity so far. So men are supposed to be quiet, stoic. Ooh, aggressive. Okay, yeah. I'm allowed to be aggressive. I'm a guy. I can yell and scream in public all I want. It's what a typical man does. It's what guys are supposed to be doing. What else? A leader. Supposed to be head of the household. Yeah, I'm the breadwinner. I'm supposed to be making the money. You know, I was watching, I think it's 90 Day Fiance. Literally one of the couples is a network engineer and the other one's a nurse. And she was uncomfortable because like, oh, he doesn't make more money than me. I don't like that. So that's definitely still a very true stereotype. Protective. Ooh, cry? Men are allowed to cry? Powerful leader. Yes. Definitely powerful leader. Any other ones, y'all? Cowboy. Especially in Texas. Gotta be a nice, good old boy, good old cowboy. What are we supposed to look like? What are men supposed to look like? Go towards physical appearance. Tall. Oh, there you go. Muscular. Okay. Man, that tall is getting really big now. Tall and muscular. Kind of like a Dorito. Just kind of start drawing the triangle. Cowboy hats, boots, button-up shirt, t-shirt, jean fit. Yee-haw. Yeah. I want my man to look like that. Like he's working out in the field, looking real nice. Okay. Good. So, oh, we got one more. Clean cut. Oh, we gotta have the clean cut. So clearly, outside of me, you know, most men are not going to fit this description. You know, I'm sorry, I may look like the perfect ideal man I know. Most men are not going to look like this. And B, you described a really unhealthy individual, like really unhealthy. They're aggressive and quiet, so they're not going, oh, manly hands. Yeah, we got to have the calluses there. Don't want to have those soft hands. That's for a lady. Yes. Those are all really good stereotypes that you all have hit at. But again, they manifest not in a great way. This describes me a very flat individual, one that is not fit for a lot of emotional relationships. And just especially when you describe, especially an older man as aggressive, I'm like, oh, that's a big red flag. Okay, y'all. We're going to do the same thing for, oh, and men are, oh no. Spoilers, don't look. Okay. Men are supposed to be independent. We don't need nobody. Let's do women now. What are some gender stereotypes for women? What are women supposed to act, be, and look like? Girly. They're supposed to be girly. Docile. Wifey. A mother, of course. The only purpose that women can serve. Be a mother. That's what you've got to do. Submissive, petite. Oh, we're getting into that too. Yeah, women have got to be petite. They've got to be shorter and smaller than me in some kind of way. Makeup, yes. You got to have time to look up every makeup tutorial on the planet and be amazing at it. Skinny, housewife, pretty face. The big thing. Dresses, yes, okay, Can't be looking like a tomboy now. Can't be doing any of that. Heels, got to bust out the heels all the time. Trophy wife, yes. Caregiver, you must take care of me. Did I skip anything? What else? Any other ones we can describe? I see work. I'm a little confused on that one. Sorry, I have to keep tilting my head for this. Caregiver. Cleaner. A cleaner. Yes, of course. Can't remember what the derogative phrase is for a wife that's always cleaning the house. Maid, of course. Yes. Because I'm a guy. I can't be expected to clean something. That's just terrible. No. Housewife. Okay. Okay. And then this is my favorite one. What are women supposed to look like? So I think we saw petite, skinny. Oh, good cook, of course. Caretaker, meal prepper. Long hair. Okay, we got to have the long hair now. Okay. Yeah, we already said petite, skinny, girly. Are there any other ways that women are supposed to look like? What do we think? Do we all agree that's like the one way women are supposed to look like? Model. Oh, yes, model. Okay, but see, now that's controversial because models are like 6'2". But you're also saying that women should be petite. Lean. Oh, curvy. Wait, you're saying lean, but you're saying curvy? What's going on here? Curvy body, short, silky hair, makeup, but we just said long hair. I'm getting so confused. Are you saying that women are supposed to look like so many different things all at the same time? Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. Yeah. See, we got some stereotypes over. Yes. See, for guys, like we got some high expectations for what we're supposed to look like, but at least it's all agreed upon. Muscular, tall. We got to have the Dorito body. We're all agreed on that, But for women, it changes generation to generation, decade to decade, and it's always super unhealthy. All right. Thank you all for participating in that. So I do this exercise to reinforce the negative notions behind gender socialization because the woman you described as well has like a million things that she has to do, a million expectations, but still manages to have less power and control in society. You are caretakers of the home. You're emotionally responsible in the relationship for multiple people sometimes, but you have a lesser position typically in society. The wage gap, there's less women in power in politics. Women's health is still a super debatable topic for some reason. All of those things have very real world consequences, and they stem from these conversations around gender socialization. Men suffer from gender socialization as well, of course. Men's suicide rates, for instance, are 3.5 times higher than women. You describe men as being quiet, aggressive, stoic, non-emotional. So what happens when I run into something that is typically very emotional? Maybe losing my job. Maybe I can no longer be the breadwinner of the house. I don't have a lot of deep emotional relationships. I don't typically go to therapy. I don't talk to people about this. So the best thing that I can do is maybe take my own life. Maybe that's the best way out. Again, self-harm for men goes up drastically. We have things like toxic masculinity that kind of erupt from this, where I'm supposed to look, feel, and be only one way as a male. And that, of course, contributes to sexual violence, both as a perpetrator and then when sexual violence happens to me. It's really hard for men to disclose and talk about this topic in particular. And of course, little girls and little boys also experience sexual violence. It's 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 6 boys. And I know that number is probably at least closer to 1 in 5 because, again, even boys have a hard time disclosing and talking about this issue as well. Brittany, you said it perfectly. Machismo. Yep. Toxic masculinity, machismo, hypermasculinity, whatever you want to call it. My segue here very quickly. I am not attacking masculinity. You can clearly see I am a male. I buy into the gender of male. I am a cis heterosexual white male. I like being a guy. I am not attacking masculinity. I am attacking this notion that we have got to be these one-dimensional people that are suppressing emotions, maintaining an appearance of hardness, use violence as an indicator of power. An example of that being whenever I'm talking about relationships or sex, it has to come off like a conquest, like a game. I cannot talk about the emotional aspect of it, how I'm happy about it. It has to be that I'm smashing this, laying down pipe, and all the other euphemisms that we use to describe sex. And it can come of teaching boys that we have to be tough all the time. Anything that's seen as weak is now feminine or gay. Now we have to make fun of sexuality of the opposite gender and say the opposite gender is lesser than, you don't want to be like that. If you are not heterosexual, you are lesser than, you don't want to be like that. That's gay, that's girly. Those are the kind of languages that we use. So no wonder there's so many men that grow up to believe that, like, oh, well, women must be like this, being gay is bad, I don't want to do any of that. When in reality, there's nothing wrong with the sexuality, there's nothing wrong with other genders, it doesn't matter. We're having this very toxic message portrayed to us very early on. And we want to stop that from happening in the first place, because that's not conducive to making a great person later on in life. And then for women, of course, talking about gender socialization, I would be inept to not say that women experience the most violence under this term gender socialization. Literally, the term gender-based violence was created to describe crimes that typically mostly occur to women. 9 out of 10 times a woman is the victim of rape. That would be an instance of that. Maybe it's closer to 8 and 10. Maybe we're not seeing as many men report on this, but no matter what, strongly the evidence is saying that women are the vast majority of victims of most types of violence. And in fact, one statistic that I always share is 1 in 3 women will experience some type of violence in their lifetime around the world. This is a worldwide statistic. So something to keep in mind. And again, a lot of that gender socialization manifests into real world life consequences, lesser positions of power and control in society, less likely to make as much income or more income than that of the same man in your field. The wage gap, we can debate the wage gap all we want, but there's definitely one that is existing right now that is impacting a lot of women. Gender socialization, of course, is far more dangerous for women than for men. Again, violence towards women, the limitations of genuine power, the messages of feminine inadequacy, that is all there. And they come from a lot of different angles. One particular angle that I grew up seeing, I grew up in the Christian faith. I went to a Christian high school, and that message was there that a woman is second in the house, below the husband, below this, below that. And later on, growing up, that's not what I interpreted from the same religious text that people were saying to me. It seems that it was more about support and that women should be looked up to in the household, not secondary and looked down upon. But that was just one way that it was described to me. And living in the Bible Belt, I know other people have experienced this type of messaging as well. So, the question, how do we stop it? How do we prevent violence from happening in the first place? What do y'all think about this in general? How do we stop it from happening? What do we think? Any thoughts on this just before we really get into the deep nitty-gritty of it? And does anybody have any questions so far about sexual violence, gender socialization, or anything that I've talked about so far? Oh, Brittany. Love that. Awareness and education. I'm trying. I don't think we really can. It's something we don't have complete control over. I'm curious about that. Can you elaborate on that? What do you mean we don't have complete control over it? While you're composing that, changing attitudes and beliefs. No matter what we say, there's a person that will choose to do what he or she wants. And arguably, that statement is not incorrect. I see where you're coming from, especially from a philosophical standpoint. Somebody can always choose to do the wrong thing. However, we can reduce the chance of them picking that decision. That's where I would come in for that. And we'll touch on that point again, but a very good point was made there. So I'm the primary prevention coordinator. So I'm about primary prevention. Secondary prevention is when you call our hotline after something has occurred in your life. Tertiary prevention is seeking counseling for after something has happened in your life. Primary prevention is like getting that COVID shot. It's stopping something before it even happens in the first place. So we look at these attitudes and belief systems at the individual, relationship, community, and societal level. Personally, for me, I focus on the individual. Some organizations focus on relationship. I like to focus on community as well. And then some of our bigger brother organizations are looking at societal. And there are some statements of prevention that I always like to share because it not only helps me stay true to what I do, but it helps you be a little bit more informed about why I'm here, why I talk about this topic, and why it's so important to talk about this in the first place. So first and foremost, inequality and the subsequent reinforcement of that inequity, known as oppression, can contribute to an environment that breeds violence in all forms, including sexual violence. In our society, any one form of inequity and oppression cannot be understood without an examination of all the different forms of inequity and oppression interact or intersect with one another. We are not going to be able to solve the issues of classism without solving the issues of racism and homophobia. We're not going to be able to look at solving this and preventing this issue against women if we're not also trying to prevent it for men, our differently abled friends, the LGBTQ community. We're just not going to be able to do that. Because in order to examine and understand one aspect of this oppression, we have to look at it in all shapes and ways. And then finally, gender inequity is driven by certain aspects of gender role socialization, including things like hypermasculinity. And these core components of prevention, just 8 little statements that kind of break down what I'm meaning from those big 3. So first and foremost, it's a preventable problem. And what I usually hear is that this has always occurred, it's always happened, it always will be. Sexual violence is a part of our DNA. It's been used as a tool of warfare, conquest, colonization. It's normalized in our rape culture. In our media, we can't get away from it. The thing is, we can. It's attitudes and beliefs that support and normalize this, so we can challenge those attitudes and beliefs and eventually substitute those attitudes and beliefs with ones that are talking about empathy, consent, talking about preventing this problem from happening in the first place. That's how we're actually going to stop this. It's both prevention and promotion. I am here in Sexual Assault Awareness Month. I will be here next month and the following month. That is how we're going to continue this conversation and actually get something done. It is long-term work, but it can be done. Prevention initiatives are best driven by the community. Again, I said earlier, I'm a cis-het white male. I am not going to have the solutions for the Latinx community, the Black community, the LGBTQ community, because I am not a part of that community. I can be somebody that can listen to their direction and provide them with what they want from me. That's it. I'm not going to say, I'm here to help, I've got the solution. That's not how it works. These communities are the ones that are going to solve this problem. And to that notion, youth involvement is so important here. Talking about this problem, young, is how we stop it from happening in the first place. Talking about consent, talking about healthy relationships, it only helps the youth. It does not give them any bad ideas. It's not going to make them more likely to want to participate in sex or sexual violence for that matter. Knowledge is really going to be power for our youth. Prevention and intervention are interrelated. Just, our hotline number is so crucial. I could not be here if we didn't have an amazing team working on that 24/7. And hopefully I can get them out of a job and I can get myself out of a job one day. That would be the goal, though. Self-care is vital to primary prevention efforts. Especially, Jaime said at the very beginning of this, if you're feeling this topic is too much, that's why it's great to walk away, turn off your laptop, call our hotline number. That's the kind of self-care that we're talking about. And then finally, everything that I've talked to you today, I've thrown out stats. It's all evidence-based. That's really crucial as well. So again, I said we were going to look at like maybe another spectrum of sexual violence, but instead of maybe behaviors, we're looking more at attitudes here. Rape, death, sexual assault, and abuse, of course, those are at the top here. At the bottom, social norms of entitlement. Individual belief systems that justify aggression, the invasion of space. Oh, that one especially, I see a lot in middle school and high school campuses. Obviously not this year, but usually it is a very normalized system to, snap somebody's bra, push somebody, hug on somebody without their consent, whatnot. And that's where it starts, that idea that I can invade somebody's personal space, and it's normalized and it's okay. So what I always get is, Sean, why does somebody commit sexual violence? Why does somebody want to perpetrate this? And I've heard a lot of different answers over the years. Sexual lust, somebody hasn't gotten off in a while, or we maybe say a victim blaming statement. And none of that is true. What it comes down to is power and control. I want to have power and control over another person's body. That explanation fits so well into explaining why the elderly and children are abused, why we see so much abuse in prison, why we see so much abuse in the LGBTQ community, the differently abled community. It explains that so well, because as we're going down and some of these communities have less power and control in society, people are looking to take advantage of that. And these, I think there's 6, 8, 8, I can count. There's 8 examples on here. There are hundreds of examples of power and control. And if there's not one on here that you feel like should be, put it in the comments, please. I would love to see what y'all think. But one that I always point at, minimizing, denying, and blaming, also known as gaslighting, where I am minimizing whatever event that I did to somebody, whatever violent act I did. It did not happen like that. And in fact, it is your fault that this happened in the first place, that real big gaslighting mentality. I am maybe isolating my partner from their friends, family, coworkers, so I am more likely to be able to control them. Physical abuse. Yeah. We have a little bit of physical abuse on here using intimidation, but yeah, physical abuse is definitely huge in this as well. Intimidation can be smashing something near them, destroying their property, abusing pets. Maybe not something that we're outwardly going to see or know. Parent-child relationships. Yeah, using children as a means of power and control over them. Power a parent has over children. Yeah, in a lot of cases of sexual violence towards children, it often is the parent because, again, you have a lot of power and control over that child. So, control of finances. Ooh, yes, economic abuse, preventing him or her from getting or keeping a job, making them ask for money, giving them an allowance. And my supervisor pointed out one time, I can't remember, it's the Housewives of Orange County, I believe. This was in a scene where it's like, yeah, he always makes me ask for money. He gives me chores to do, and if I don't do them before he gets home, he won't give me any money for that week. And that is a perfect example of that control of emotions. I see this a lot in younger relationships as well, especially threatening your own mental health. Saying like, hey, if you don't come over, I don't know if I'm going to make it through the night. I can't make it without you. I'm going to hurt myself. I'm going to take my own life. So you feel obligated to go over there, but that is just pure manipulation. That is purely controlling of emotions. Very great, y'all. Good examples. So prevention is not going to be any of the following. I know we live in Texas. Someone's probably told you you should buy a gun. You should not have to conform your appearance. Maybe you got to lock your doors, walk with your keys in your hand, all of this stuff, the buddy system. But this is just risk reduction. And again, we all do it. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying to uninstall your front door and let be what let be. Of course not. However, risk reduction is fine, but there's always this inherent victim blaming that goes on with it. There's even some curriculums that focus on risk reduction and really have to break away from that victim blaming because no one wants to be assaulted. Nobody wants to be stolen from, murdered, trafficked. Nobody wants that to happen. But if we are focusing on the victim and what the victim needs to do, you can check all the boxes. Something is still going to happen. Risk reduction doesn't solve the problem. What I always say is if I have the example of me and my friend go out, I get drunk and I get assaulted. If I go back in time and I switch it around and say like, okay, well, I'm not going to drink then. He drinks, he ends up getting assaulted. What happened? You know, I didn't prevent the rape from happening. I just changed who it happened to. And if we both don't go out, somebody still gets assaulted that night. It still doesn't matter. We're not solving the rape. We're not solving the prevention of that rape in the first place. So what we want to do is we want to look at our risk factors, the risk factors for perpetrating sexual violence, because if we can prevent this and have a conversation around this, this is how we're going to stop it from happening. So I said before, we have individual risk factors, relationship, community, and societal. So some individual ones, a general aggressiveness and acceptance of sexual violence, early sexual initiation. I see this a lot with men as well. I believe Chris Brown says something to the effect that he had sex when he was, I don't remember, it was something like 12 or 8 years old. You can't have sex then. He was raped then. However, we look at that as men and say like, oh my God, I can't believe you got laid. Like, must have been an older woman. That's awesome. I can't believe that happened. But that early sexual initiation is so bad for your development because, again, that is not consensual. That was rape. Exposure to sexually explicit media. I can go on and on about how porn is not very good for your mentality. Hostility towards women, hypermasculinity, unhealthy attitudes towards sex and sexuality. Down there, we have prior sexual victimization or perpetration. Of course, if I perpetrate this crime before, statistically speaking, I'm usually going to do it 5 more times. But if I was assaulted, maybe earlier in life, especially by a parent, again, prior abuse, Brittany, thank you. Prior abuse, it does not mean I'm going to do it. It's not a guarantee. There's a chance that I might. That's called the cycle of abuse, where I'm abused at some point in my life and I'm going to commit that abuse to somebody else. So our relationship factors would be things like a family environment characterized by physical violence and conflict. If I'm seeing my parents do this to each other, father or mother, my guardians committing this to each other, then I'm going to be more likely to commit this later on in life. Association with sexually aggressive, hypermasculine, delinquent peers. This one that I always share is, I think it was 2017. A young woman was assaulted in New York. It's the big grassy area everyone loves. Central Park? Yes. Okay. In Central Park. And it was committed by teenagers. Like, I'm talking 15-year-olds. And one of them was like 13. And he ended up calling 911 and saying, like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Like, I didn't know it was going to be like this. So clearly, he did not want to be in that situation, but it was his association with the other hyper aggressive peers that got him into that situation. So picking your friends, like, that's also a huge crucial part of this. And some other ones, again, in the community level. Again, poverty, lack of unemployment opportunities, institutional support from police and judicial systems, societal ones, societal norms that support sexual violence, societal norms that support male superiority and sexual entitlement, norms that maintain women's inferiority. All of these are the risk factors to sexual violence. And again, there are organizations working on all of these different levels. We mainly focus on the community and individual level at Darcy. What are maybe some other risk factors that I'm kind of missing out? What do we think? Are there some other ones that I could have put on there? Or what do you think are going to be the ones that I emphasize the most and talk about the most? What do we think? I'm gonna give one away already. Hypermasculinity. I'm so sorry if I misspelled that. So, risk factors to perpetrating sexual violence. Putting yourself out there. Can you elaborate just a little bit more on that one? So, what are some of those risk factors to perpetrating sexual violence? One of them, hypermasculinity. That's definitely one that I talk about and emphasize a lot at Darcy. What could possibly be some other ones that I look at? Messages on social media. Ooh. And Jaime, that can be a good or a bad thing. Because honestly, those past few years, I've been seeing a lot of good content out there. I really have been. At the same time, of course, there is way more terrible ones. Exposure to sexual content, yeah. Especially just early, again, that sexual initiation can be maybe pornographic as well. And just pornography just has a lot of bad messages in it at the end of the day. Oh my gosh, it will not let me scroll up. Okay. Making it seem like you're okay with it and telling someone yes, but in reality, you do not want to. So I would flip that around and, oh, I got rid of my annotations. So I would flip that around and say that's usually, what I usually hear is silence doesn't mean yes. A lack of a response doesn't mean yes. So we are going to be looking for the signs of that yes. So we want to flip that around just a little bit, but I do agree. We had hyper masculinity, social media messaging, toxic messages, and consent, or lack thereof. Great. Okay. What do you think are going to be some protective factors? So they're going to be the opposite of our risk factors. They're things that we can start teaching at a younger age to, curb some of our risk factors, to have more healthier conversations around sex and sexuality, to talk more about consent 101. Yep. Just teaching that very early on. Just speaking about it, just general education. Yeah, I agree. I agree. The more we normalize the conversation, the more likely it is we're going to prevent this from happening. It's a very taboo conversation in a lot of communities, and I understand where that's come from, but we don't need to be like that anymore. Healthy family relationships, for sure. Yeah, I really feel for those of us that are stuck in these very toxic households. It can be hard to establish boundaries, get away from that toxicity. Yeah. Any other ones? Healthy friend relationships. Oh, yes. I agree. Yeah, those are really good protective factors. And again, so there are a million risk factors as well as protective factors. So I do want to keep that in mind before we move on, that there's going to be a lot of those. So the ones that we focus on at Darcy the most, again, hypermasculinity, we've really gotten into this one already. Male entitlement. So this is where I'm raised with the belief that I, as a male, am entitled to positions of power, women's body, and it's more kind of thrusted on me, especially at an early age. I remember always going over to visit my uncles, and they would always say, even when I was like 5, 6, 7 years old, how many girlfriends you got? And, you know, it was always this joke or whatever. But I really did take away, like, okay, I mean, like, they really want me to be in some type of relationship. They want me to at least be talking with girls. It was very much implied girls. If I was not straight, that would not have been okay in my family. Conjugal rights. Could you go a little bit more into that, Brittany? I'm curious about that. So that male entitlement, it really starts at a young age. Objectifying people, if I'm turning them into a sexual object, again, you know, social media messaging, pornography kind of contribute to that a lot. Violence towards women, I also call this one otherizing women, where we are using maybe either religion, gender stereotypes, whatnot, to put women more at risk for violence and then less likely to receive those positions of power, political power, buying power, whatever that looks like. And then finally, some unhealthy attitudes towards sex and sexuality. Those are going to be all our stereotypical, you know, men are keys and women are locks. If you can unlock a lot of locks as a key, it's a great key. If your lock is unlocked by a lot of keys, that's a terrible lock. That would just be a crude example of that unhealthy attitudes towards sex. The right to have sex with your partner whenever you want. I'm confused by that one because that doesn't sound very consensual. Because if I'm entitled to my partner anytime without consent, that does not. That seems like we're going a little bit backwards on that. You might have to elaborate me a little bit more on that one. Oh, as a risk factor. Okay. I thought you were saying for a protective factor. Yes, I totally understand that. And that mentality is very much there, especially in our younger people relationships. A lot of them are like, oh yeah, I just want to get into the relationship for the sex. I just want that. I just want, you know, I want that. I'm entitled to that. And pressuring their partner to get into that situation. I very much agree with that. That would definitely be an unhealthy attitude towards sex and sexuality as well. Another one would be maybe homophobia in general. Just anytime that I'm degrading another sexuality, the LGBTQ community, and anytime that we are otherizing or degrading a community of people, they're more likely to experience violence. Are there any other unhealthy attitudes towards sex and sexuality that we can think of? And they're the nasty stereotypes too, especially that I see with race. Maybe that Asian men are portrayed a certain way, black women are portrayed a certain way. Judging, yeah, yeah, yeah. Especially if we're maybe slut shaming or doing something like that. Hmm. Any other unhealthy attitudes that we want to say out into the ether before we move on? I like this one because it's just kind of general and it really just kind of nails it. It says like, yeah, this is kind of the catch-all for any of those like terrible myths that we had growing up. I'd say virginity should go on there as well. It's a terrible concept, honestly. Okay. So our protective factors, parental use of reasoning to resolve family conflict, emotional health and connectedness, academic achievement, empathy and concern for one's own actions, men and boys as allies to help end sexual violence, and empowering young women and girls to leadership. Those are a few of the protective factors that we really like to talk about and focus on at Darcy. If we are preparing ourselves with conflict resolution, high expectations for healthy relationships, a good understanding of consent, sexuality, and sex. If we have goals, academic achievement is just one. It does not have to be academic achievement. That is just maybe perhaps a goal that we can set onto a youth. Goals are great for especially young people, keeps them very focused and maintained in the community. Empathy, huge. I do not see enough of that, and it is a muscle we need to be contracting every single day. I've seen what a lack of empathy can do to people. Does not make them very nice, and that's what we really want to do. That's why we have so much victim blaming and a lot of divide and hatred going on right now in our country. It's that huge lack of empathy and understanding for people that don't maybe align with our values, don't share our mindset, have grown up differently than us. So what can we do as our role in the community? We're going to approach gender violence, sexual violence as a community issue, and it can be solved as a community. Knowing what that rape culture is, how it came to be, why it's still here, what can we do to stop it? Believing survivors, we're not going to victim blame. We're going to try to open up and create a safe space for our survivors. We want to be an active bystander, and that is all what it takes to help prevent sexual violence and be an upstander in our community. So, do we have any questions or thoughts? Anything we'd like to take away from this? Any last minute nuggets that we'd like to share? Teaching our kids empathy and then having those adults keep practicing that empathy. I totally agree with you, Jaime. And just really quickly, I have a Google form. It'd be great if you all could just fill that out super quickly. It really helps me get some feedback on what you thought about today's presentation.
Thank you so very much, Sean. Appreciate it. As Sean mentioned, he's got the link to the Google form.
And I did link the wrong one, by the way. Sorry to interrupt you. That second one that I sent, that's the right one. My bad.
Okay. So, and I also put in a link to a brief survey. We would love your feedback as to how we did today. And so, if you could just take a few moments of your time to either click on the link and go to the survey or cut and paste the link, we would appreciate that. And unless there is anything else, you're always welcome to put your question in the chat box. Unless there's anything else, we wanted to say thank you very much. Oh, yes. And also, you can also go to dccd.edu/counseling. You can see that in the chat box to learn more about the counseling services. You can also email counseling at dccd.edu. And also leaving you with this, that counseling sessions are free to currently enrolled students age 18 or older at Dallas College. And we do offer both in-person counseling or face-to-face as well as virtual counseling. So when you email counseling at dccd.edu, just let us know you'd like an appointment, and we will then follow up with you, make sure that you get an appointment. We are trying to make sure that our students their needs are taken care of. We want to make sure that you succeed. And also just letting you know, if you encounter any kind of difficulties while you're at Dallas College, while you're taking classes with us, it could be anything: personal issues, financial setbacks. It could be questions about, beyond just class, which classes to take. If there's something like if a fellow student says to you, there's no food in the house, or we're about to be thrown out of our apartment or something like that, and you want to help, you're not sure how, just reach out to us at counseling. And if we don't have an answer, we know someone who will have an answer, who may have some support. We help out in so many ways. We also have our connections team. Our connections team helps students with concerns, anything like housing, food insecurity. And I cannot forget our Title IX coordinators. If you ever witness some kind of sexual misconduct on campus or at any of our events, and you want to report it, you can reach out to our Title IX team. And that's something I want to leave you with, is that some of you are going to transition or transfer over to a university. So whether you are at a community college or a university, you have a Title IX person. Title IX means the law that protects you against things like a sexual misconduct on campus. And I see Ms. Francine put there the way to connect with them. It is dccd.edu/title Roman numeral 9 IX. And thank you, Ms. Francine. So we want to make sure that you're aware if there's a concern either for yourself or a fellow student, raise your voice, talk to your teacher, talk to a counselor, your academic advisor. And if we don't have some help, we will be able to find you some help. So having said that, unless there's anything else from Ms. Francine or from Sean, I'd like to say thank you for being here. And everyone, make it a great day.